with bilateral large volume pulmonary embolism with right heart strain. She has battled for 2 years, and now she's managing 1 9-hour shift per week in a different role entirely. But that one shift is still extremely challenging for her due to ongoing symptoms. Her life has been turned upside down, and she's undergone significant trauma, yet cannot speak about the cause for fear of recrimination. Another nurse, a specialist theatre nurse, has been diagnosed with vaccine-induced pulmonary fibrosis, a serious and lifelong lung disease that causes permanent lung scarring that progressively worsens over time. There is no cure, only temporary symptomatic relief. She was told she would lose her job if she didn't take the vaccine. So despite her misgivings, she went ahead because she's a single mother of 2 children. Now those children are her carers. My lady, it's easy to reel off abstract facts and figures, but these are real people facing insurmountable hardship who felt coerced into taking a vaccine in the first place and now can't even mention their reactions to their colleagues. In addition to their injury and bereavement, those we represent have also experienced a second trauma. A lack of medical knowledge and understanding about the risk and presentation of vaccine injury has left injured people undiagnosed and without treatment. Furthermore, a prevailing institutional mindset within medical bodies and the government has been fixated solely on acknowledging the benefits of the vaccine. This has led to reporting vaccine injury to feel disbelieved, unheard and marginalised. Censorship is a very real issue, my lady, for the vaccine injured and bereaved. Their support groups have been shut down by social media platforms, and their experience is censored by the mainstream media. They have to speak in code online for fear of having their only source of support taken away from them. They face stigma and abuse for sharing their symptoms in the context of the COVID vaccine, and even being branded as anti-vax for sharing very real and medically proven vaccine injuries. Care must be taken in the inquiry's own examination of the role of social media and ensure that the inquiry itself doesn't fall into the trap of further disenfranchising those who have experienced vaccine injury. To be clear, those we represent voluntarily participated in the COVID-19 vaccination programme when called upon. A significant number of them encountered adverse reactions following the first vaccine dose. Nonetheless, they were advised by their doctors to proceed with a second dose, their doctors not suspecting any vaccine-related connection. My lady, there is a particular significance to these Module 4 hearings taking place in the autumn. Those we represent are concerned that given the reported return of COVID-19 variants and the discussion in government and the media of a winter vaccine rollout, that their experiences will once again be censored and ignored as they don't fit with the government narrative around vaccines. The COVID vaccine injured and bereaved have been marginalised in the past 3 years, struggling to have their voices and experiences heard, having gone from being fit and healthy people, leading full and active lives, to being disabled and dependent on benefits. They have suffered additional trauma due to the lack of medical, psychological and financial support available. These are not people, my lady, who are dealing with a sore arm or flu-like symptoms. These are people who've had a stroke, a heart attack or lost a limb. People whose bodies are full of clots. People who've had debilitating migraines almost every single day for up to 3 years. And people who now have allergic reactions to everything they consume, even water. And young women who'd hoped to become mothers, but whose periods have stopped completely. These are not the normal side effects anybody would reasonably expect from a pharmaceutical product. These are people who've lost their livelihoods, their friends, and in some cases their families. In addition, the vaccine injured and bereaved can't process their trauma because they're fighting every step of the way for recognition, validation, care and support. They can't express or record their experiences without being misunderstood, misrepresented or used for somebody else's agenda. In August of last year, the UKCV family lost its first member to suicide, and a survey of their members reported that 73% have considered suicide. Both UKCV family and Scottish Vaccine Impact Group regularly deal with suicidal members. All 3 groups are extremely concerned that in the absence of psychological support for those who are now dealing with a chronic as well as stigmatised illness, this will not be the last suicide within the injured community. The treatment of the vaccine injured in this country has historically been a source of shame. Neglect and discrimination has been brought to the light through the COVID-19 vaccination rollout and is now resulting in serious mistrust of British institutions, of the government and of healthcare systems. Trust is vital in the event of future health crises. And in order to rebuild trust from the general public, the UK must urgently develop an effective and compassionate means of medically, practically, financially and emotionally supporting the vaccine injured. My Lady, I will now move on to some focused submissions on the provisional scope of Module 4. The first point I would make is that, my Lady, is that those we represent are from England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and therefore we press upon you, as others have, the need to analyse all the issues within the Module 4 scope from the perspective of the UK Government and the devolved administrations. Secondly, my Lady, you've indicated that as part of your provisional scope that the inquiry will examine vaccine safety issues. And Mr Wald, King's Counsel, that stated this morning that this will form a significant part of the inquiry's work. Our clients seek an examination into the public awareness of the safety profile approval process for the vaccine and steps that might have been overlooked due to the speed of the vaccine production and distinctions between this vaccine production and others previously approved. This is what Mr Wald termed the balance between speed and safety, and we're grateful for the acknowledgement this morning that this is an important topic that the inquiry will consider. Our clients also asked the inquiry, as others have, to conduct a thorough investigation into the decision not to use alternative therapies to treat COVID-19, instead employing emergency regulations to roll out a new vaccine. We note the submissions made by other core participants urging the inquiry to look carefully at therapeutics and not just vaccines. My Lady, you've also indicated that you intend to look at post-marketing surveillance of the vaccine, such as the yellow card monitoring and reporting system. The reality is that despite the presence of this system, we still have no idea how many people have actually had an adverse reaction to the COVID-19 vaccine. For example, according to figures updated in April 2023, 53.8 million people in the UK had the first dose of the COVID vaccine, and 50.7 million people had the second. Those numbers are reported up until September of last year. That leaves just over 3 million people, or 6% of the UK population, who stopped after the first dose. That is clearly 6% of the population who did not come forward for the second part of what was clearly marketed as a two-part vaccine. And my Lady, you should be concerned about the reasons why that 6% did not take the second dose. One reason may have been that they did not feel able to have the second dose because of how unwell the first dose made them feel. So in our submission, the inquiry should, as a matter of urgency, investigate, firstly, the effectiveness of the passive reporting system, such as the yellow card scheme, and secondly, any other ways to determine exactly how many people have been impacted by an adverse reaction. The COVID-19 vaccine was a novel vaccine on a global scale, so adverse reactions to it must have been expected. The yellow card system was not able to cope with a medication response of this magnitude, and we submit there should have been a bespoke reporting system for this vaccine, which should have collected proper data and have involved follow-up care to ensure the well-being of those who reported. And as part of this bespoke scheme, data could have been collected from those who submitted reports, for example on ethnicity, gender, age, medical history and blood type, which could have then indicated relevant factors that could point to why particular groups reacted to the vaccine. The pandemic provided a one-off opportunity to monitor and record potential adverse reactions, given they must have been expected, but this data has not been collected. Moving to my next topic, Mr Wald reminded us this morning that the scope of Module 4 is necessarily provisional, and we're grateful for that indication. My Lady, we submit that you should include within your scope the issue of support for the vaccine injured and bereaved. In our submission, your inquiry should include an examination of why those individuals have been discriminated against in the provision of healthcare services, and in particular, why they've been denied equal access to appropriate medical testing to help identify relatively common pathologies in post-vaccine patients, and a specialist cohort of medical professionals who can contribute to research and inform clinical guidelines, and a dedicated research hospital. My Lady, it should be the concern of this inquiry that there is currently no appropriate treatment of vaccine-induced illness and injury, or an